Over the weekend I got to try out the Fujifilm X-T3 camera. I've not had it long enough to make a review, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys on the pros and cons in my opinion. I'm a videographer, so this is going to be a video orientated look at the camera, and I'm also using a Sony a7 III and Sony a6500 as my two main cameras, so I'm sort of going to be comparing it to that in a way, because they're the main cameras that I use. The X-T3 fits price-wise pretty much in between the a7 III and the a6500, so let's get straight into it and have a look. The Fuji X-T3 films in 4K at 60 frames per second, so I can finally slow down my 4K footage. It also films in 10-bit, so you can squeeze an extra little bit of colour out of it, and it will still look shiny once you've done a colour grade on it. It is an APS-C size sensor, which isn't a deal breaker, it's just slightly smaller than the full frame sensor, but Panasonic are currently killing it with the GH5, which has a micro four thirds sensor, which is even smaller than the sensor on this. It just means you have to stop down a little bit more just to let that extra bit of light in, to get that sort of blurry depth of field look. The first thing you'll notice is at the top all of the dials. Now these are cool, but I've set these all to automatic straight away because in my opinion when I'm filming weddings and stuff, the more fiddling I'm doing with all the dials, the less actual stuff I'm recording. So I'll set these all to auto and I'm controlling these through the little scroll wheels here. The next thing you notice is the screen. It does flip out like the Sony screens do, but it also comes out sideways as well, which, you know, I've found pretty much no use for. So yeah, I'm not sure what that's there for, but it is there and it's got, you know, more swivel capability than a Sony camera does. But you still won't be using this for vlogging because it still doesn't turn right round so you can see yourself from the front. When I got into the menu system, I thought maybe it's worse than Sony's menu system, but after watching a few YouTube videos, a few tutorials on how to use it, it's really nice having all the video settings in one place. And after a while I got used to the menu system pretty easily. So enough of the boring stuff, let's get into image quality. The image quality is amazing on this camera. It's so sharp at 4K 60 frames per second. The dynamic range is really, really good, and I just love the colours that come out of this straight out of the camera. Now I'm filming on the Eterna picture profile, which is one of the many picture profiles you get straight out the box with the X-T3. I heard a lot about Eterna through YouTube, so I thought I'd put it on that straight away. So the colours you're seeing right now are with the Eterna picture profile turned on. I use Sony a lot, like on a daily basis, and I prefer this Fuji look actually to the Sony look. So if I could, I'd have this Fuji look every single day. There is a slight crop in 4K 60 frames per second, but it's not significant, so it didn't really bother me at all. So I've got two lenses with this camera. The first is this beast, the 16 to 55 f2.8. And that is the 24 to 70 equivalent on full frame. And the first thing you notice, it is big, the lens is big, and it also weighs a fair bit too. So when I was balancing this on the Weeble Lab, I had to put the camera as far back as the plate would allow me to counterbalance how front heavy it is. The quality from the lens though was really nice, it was sharp, and the autofocus also was very good on it. I just don't understand why a lens for APS-C has to be this big. You buy these cameras because they're small and then you sort of put these huge lenses on them and it kind of defeats the point, especially when we have the Tamron, which is for full frame, 28 to 75, and it's just lighter, it's thinner, and it just has a bit less of a profile. The other lens I tried out was the Fuji 35mm 1.4 lens. This is kind of the equivalent of like your 50mm, and it's actually again a really nice lens. The problem with this one was when I was focusing, the lens actually physically moves and this causes a bit of noise. So you won't be wanting to use your internal camera audio and it might be picked up on an external microphone. But overall, really impressed with this lens. It's quite light and it's, you know, really nice to have. Definitely probably an essential if you're getting the Fuji X-T3. Autofocus for the most part was very, very quick. Pull in focus and touch to focus happened literally in an instant. Coming from a Sony camera where the autofocus is already very good, this was brilliant for me. I did have one issue with the autofocus, and that was it was almost too responsive. Even though I played around with the settings a little bit, changed the responsiveness a bit, when you set a focus point, if someone walks in front of the camera, then it'll automatically focus on that, even if it's only a really brief thing. So it's almost too quick for its own good. I like the Sonys because when you set a focus point, if someone just walks past the camera, that focus point will still be in focus. But if someone stands in front of the camera, then it will change focus. So I guess it's a little bit too responsive, but I don't think that's an issue for most people, to be honest. It also has face tracking and eye tracking in video mode, which actually works really, really well. But I'd only use this for kind of interviews, I guess, because it did override, for me, it did override the touch to focus, which is not good because sometimes I do shots of a lot of faces, it doesn't know who to focus on. So I prefer just to use the touch to focus mode for that. So the battery life is not amazing. If you've used previous generation Sony cameras, like the A7 II, the A7S II, the A6500, then you know these batteries are small and you're not getting much out of them. So you'll probably be filming for an hour and a half before you're having to change them. But for the size of this thing and the power it's churning out, you know, I don't blame the battery life for being quick. Just get a few batteries for it if you're going to buy this. So far, pretty much so good. But now on to the deal breaker for me, unfortunately. This might not be a deal breaker for everyone. This is not me slating the camera in any way. It's just for me, my needs, this camera is not good for me for this reason. And that is the lack of in-body stabilization. Now people say Sony's in-body image stabilization isn't that great. Some of the lenses I've got are not stabilized, but it does do the trick. And when I'm filming handheld, I can keep it really, really steady on the Sonys. With these cameras, the body is not stabilized, and it's actually really difficult to find a stabilized lens for the X mount as well. So the combination of not having stabilization in the camera or the lens, you really can tell the difference when using it handheld. Me personally, I'm filming a lot of weddings. I'm doing a lot of handheld work. I like to just take my camera off the monopod, off of the gimbal, and just walk around with it in hand. So I'm sort of inconspicuous and I'm getting, you know, more freedom to get the shots I want. With this camera, I couldn't do that. It pretty much had to be on a gimbal or monopod at all times. I held it pretty steady and managed to get okay shots out of it. A bit of warp stabilize helped it, but it's just adding to, you know, the post-production time. So for me, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but the lack of stabilization in both the body and most of the lenses is pretty much a deal breaker for me. It's 100% the reason I won't be buying this camera. However, it's not a deal breaker for everyone. If you're doing a lot of corporate work, then the chances are you'll be on a monopod, tripod or gimbal most of the time. And the same thing for if you're doing sort of filmmaking, if you're making short films, then you've got a lot of time to plan and a lot of time to set up. Then this camera is really, really actually good for those reasons. So my final thoughts on the Fuji X-T3. I think Fuji are onto something with these cameras. I think I'm surprised they're not more popular. The image quality is amazing. The features with the 4K 60 frames per second and the 10-bit internal recording, it's just a great set of features in this camera. The lack of in-body stabilization makes it a deal breaker for me, but if you're doing a lot of corporate work or filmmaking work and you're using gimbals, tripods, monopods all of the time, then you probably won't notice this anyway. Overall, it is a very, very good camera for the price, and I'll have to let you decide whether it's worth you buying or not. Thank you for watching. If you really like the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll be doing a lot more sort of gear talk and reviews in the future. So if you're into that stuff, then subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next one.